Hi guys, in this video we're going to look into Substance Painter. We're going to have a quick overview of the UI and the basic tools that we can do. So when you first load up Substance Painter, you're going to get this little window here. For your very first project, you're going to click this Start Painting button here, and it's going to bring you like a test project up that you can use to start painting with. So I'm going to click that button there, and it's going to load my model. So what Substance Painter is it is a texturing piece of software. It uses PBR rendering and a PBR workflow. So that PBR stands for physical based rendering, and you guys have been using color maps. You've been creating your textures as color maps. Some of you might have looked into bump maps and things like this, but what Substance Painter does, it uses PBR materials. Okay, and we're going to cover what that is in class. So the big thing with Substance Painter is you get your model here. So in Photoshop, you would just be painting on the UVs themselves. So this view over here, Substance Painter allows us to paint directly onto the model. So you can make these windows bigger or smaller. Down the bottom, we've got a sort of shelf. These are some preset stuff. I'm not going to go too much into those at the moment. We've got our layer stack over here, so it's really important to note that it works very, very similar to Photoshop. I can click add another layer, and it adds that layer on top of that one there. We'll come back to this one in a second. I'm just going to delete that layer here. We have our texture set list. So think about when you've been applying materials to things in Maya. These are separate materials, and this person has set up their project, so we've got a separate material for the base, a separate material for the body, and a separate material for the head. So I can just click between these shaders, depending on which one I want to paint on. You can see my UV view switching there. So if I click this little button here, I can hide or show these parts, so you could separate out things there. Our texture set list is here. So these are the channels that you're painting. So you have been making your base color channels normally. You've been making your just normal color channels. But PBR uses metal maps, it uses roughness maps, it uses normal maps, which are a bit like bump maps, but they're kind of a modern one. And it also uses height maps, which are a displacement map set up down there. Okay, we can bake mesh maps in here, more on this later. We have display settings over here, so this is to do with, so I can rotate the environment here, and you'll notice that my lighting is changing, so where the light is hitting my model here, so I want to kind of look at this. You can play around with the environment blur, you can change the environment here to give you a slightly different feel, so you've got lots of studio lighting. These black ones are the ones I recommend. If I put this on, you'll get a slight sort of, you can see I've got a warm tint to this now, so that might affect my texturing. So I tend to like to use the studio lighting setups that you get. It's a bit more kind of clean to work with there. Just thinking about it a little bit. Cool. We've also got camera settings in here, so you have field of view, so I can kind of zoom in, zoom out. It's on 50 by default. I can leave that there. We have some post-processing effects as well that we can play around with if you want. Our shader settings, this is where you change your shader. If you want to do opacity, you will need to click in here and use this shader here, alpha blending, to allow for opacity maps to work. You have AO intensity and other kind of shader setups in here. You're probably not going to be using these. The one that you are going to be using a lot is the properties down the side here. So we can have a look at the basic tools and how things work. So I have got my brush. I'm using the paint brush over here, and you can see that there. Along the top, I've got the size that I can edit. You can also see on the right that it's affecting my size as well. So now that's larger. If we scroll down, we have the alpha shape, more on these later, and then if we go down further, we've got our properties. So if I select red and click off of that one, and now I can paint some red onto here. Okay, I can play around with, let's have a look up here, brush, spacing, angle, looking for, okay, so it's not letting me edit the softness, but I can go down on the side over here and I can have a look at brushes, and I've got loads of pre-built brushes here, so I could find the hard brush and I could use that hard brush instead to paint some hard details on there. Cool. We have the eraser down the side here, so I can rub bits out. we have the smudge tool here, so I can sort of blend things together, smudge things out. We have the clone stamp tool, so I could clone an area and use that. And those are our sort of basic tools over the side. So you've got your properties tab over here. You'll notice it changes when I change things. I can make a new layer here. Let's change our color to blue or purple, that'll do. And now if I draw here, you can see the purple is on top of the red. If I was to drag this one underneath, it's now underneath the red there. Okay, you have opacity here, so I could make that red more see-through if I wanted to blend things together. I can change the blending mode, so I could set that to multiply. You can now see those layers are multiplying there. Yeah, so you've got all of your normal stuff for that Photoshop has in here. I can hold Shift, so I'm just holding Alt to move around here, just using Maya controls, just panning around. Okay, if I hold Shift and click, I can draw straight lines, which will be really useful. It's not letting me zoom out nicely. There we go. My mouse isn't the best. So yeah, if I hold Shift, so if I click here, then hold Shift, you can see it's dragging from that point. So I could make some really crisp shapes if I wanted. Maybe I could fill that in if I wanted, but yeah, you could build up the stuff using that. Okay, so that's a basic introduction to Substance Painter there. We've looked at what the kind of the basic UI does. We've looked at some basic paint tools. In the next video, I'm going to show you something called fill layers and how fill layers work, and we're going to have a sort of drill down into what metal maps are and roughness maps and normal maps that I've mentioned, but not really told you what they are yet. Okay, thank you very much.